Ми тут під надзвичайним будинком Української опери і театру міста Одеси, де якраз відбувається тепер Чорноморський форум на тему безпеки, і на якому розглядається надзвичайна потреба відновлення перестарілої системи оборони в Європі, яка, між іншим, має бути перебудована на базі ініціативи України і найновішої технології, які розвинули Збройні сили України.
Thank you very much again, and welcome once again to Odessa and to Odessa Opera House. And we are so proud, you know, in art history of the world, there were many debuts on opera stage happening here. Now one more historical event, Secretary Pompeo's opera stage debut happened right now, right here. Your applause, dear friends and colleagues.
That's very kind, very kind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary. And let me start. Your name is very well known in Ukraine, with a big respect. And one of big reasons for this is the Crimean Declaration. Pompeo Declaration, it's also called in our country, like it was Wallace Declaration in 1940 about Baltic states being not recognized to be part of Soviet Union. And I just, if I may, will quote, as we did, it was July 2018, and your declaration said, as we did in the Wallace Declaration in 1940, the United States reaffirms as policy its refusal to recognize the Kremlin's claims of sovereignty over territory seized by force in contravention of international law. In concert with allies, partners, and the international community, the United States rejects Russia's attempted annexation of Crimea and pledges to maintain this policy until Ukraine's territorial integrity is restored. Absolutely great words. But today we hear from media some leaks that United States is considering possibility recognizing of illegally annexed Crimea to be Russian. And do you think it's possible? What is your attitude to this? Thank you.
Look, I don't know. I don't do crystal balls or predictions. I hope not. It would be a mistake of epic proportions. I get the frustration, and I get the physical reality of the place. I'm not naive about what's physically possible in this moment. But that doesn't mean one should go and say, no, we are giving up for all time. This is one of the things I hope to communicate. I get asked often, when will this end? And my answer sadly, comes from my Christian faith, which is, there's evil in the world. It doesn't end the day that Vladimir Putin says, I'm going to cease the current operations. There are bad people that want to undermine the freedom and liberty that the people of Ukraine want desperately. And they want to do the same to the United States of America, and they're trying to do it to the Israelis, right? So this challenge is, we always think about it in fits and starts, but the truth is it's continuous. And I think that's what many forgot in the West. In the aftermath of the collapse of the Soviet Union, they took a holiday and said it's over, right? It's not, and so we ought not to preclude Crimea being not only part of Ukraine but a functional, operational part of Ukraine by recognizing it, even if it is not achievable to do what we all would really like to see happen there. In the moment. This continues, and there will be another day. Just as no one expected the Soviet Union to fall in 1989, things happen and they break, but they only do so in the face of enormous resolve and real cost-imposing actions on the part of the West.
As you know, our topic of our forum is chess, and we use these analogies. And many thought 3 years ago that Ukrainian role in this big chess game was to be a sacrificial pawn. But thanks to resilience of Ukrainian people and courage, we promoted ourselves with the support of our friends and allies to the queen, from the pawn to the queen. Really, today Ukraine has, not just we with the force, opened the Black Sea. Having no big military ships, we destroyed big part of Russian Black Sea fleet. But also today we have 1 million infantry, battle-hardened, who know what is the warfare of 21st century. And this is absolutely priceless, and this is a huge asset that the United States can have as a player. So you can take us, use us, help us today, but use us tomorrow. I mean, if it will be needed, who will be in trenches near Tehran or Beijing if it will be needed? Ukrainians prove themselves that we are ready, that we can. So, taking all this into account, is this recognized in DC today, in Washington, by administration? Is Ukraine seen as a real, very important chess piece, or just as a pawn which can be sacrificed?
Oh goodness, some of each by different folks. For sure, it's difficult to extrapolate across everyone's thinking. I must say, even in I know everyone's view on President Trump. I have a different view to a material degree, but suffice it to say, I think it's become very clear, by the way, to the United States security establishment that we have a lot to learn about warfare with the advent of UAVs and drones and AI technology and electronic surveillance and ESW warfare and jamming, that there's lots of things that we had systems that we paid an awful lot of money for that are probably not functional. And so we have a different both equipment and training requirement, and I think we are preparing to take on board many of the lessons that have been learned from that. Every conflict's different, but this is, this is a great power that Ukraine is fighting, right? Always we talk about great power conflict. This isn't fighting Al-Shabaab in Somalia or taking on ISIS. This is fundamentally different from that, and I do think there's a lot to learn. As for the deeper question about whether it's viewed as a pawn, I don't think that anyone believes that. I don't think anybody thinks, oh my goodness, we can sacrifice that and get peace. I haven't ever heard that articulated. There have been many in my party, my own party, the Republican Party, that have disappointed me deeply and have said things that are inconsistent with what I think are the deep American interests that we have here. But I think they all also know that in the end, there's no walking away from this for the United States, right? It's not the case that you can say, Godspeed, you're on your own. This will continue to chase all of us who believe in basic human dignity, property rights, all the things, all the indicia of sovereign nationhood. I think that will ultimately come to prevail. I regret, right? I regret that there was not more done in 2014, that there was not more done in 2022, and that deterrence was lost. And now the challenge is putting it back to a place. I mean, I was adjacent to the Minsk conversations, right? People forget, well, we're going back to the negotiating table. Well, we've been at the negotiating table an awful lot, and there was no hammer. And I get it. It was at a different time. There was fighting in the line of control, but not the massive aggression that transpired in February 22. But the issues, I'll bet if you went and looked at the debate issue papers from the Minsk conversations, they would look almost identical to the same conversations that were taking place today. And so that must remind us all that when Vladimir Putin lays down his weapons for a moment, you can't go back to Russian gas. When Vladimir Putin lays down his weapons for a moment, there can't be life as it once was. It must be with the deep recognition that this could easily happen again. It may not be in Ukraine next time. It may be on the northern flank. It could be Russians taking action somewhere else in the world, right? They still have some troops on the ground in Syria. The Russians are in Venezuela. This is a global challenge presented by a raunchous power who truly believes that the way of the world in the West is not something they want to permit to exist.
What should be our attitude? How we should explain to ourselves what's really going on?
So that's funny you asked that question. So when I was the Secretary of State, I was just reminded of this. I was the 70th Secretary of State for the United States. At that time, President Trump was the 45th president. And so I would always do the math and remember there was a lot more turnover in my job than his. And I remember, too, how my predecessor was fired. It was by tweet. And so every morning I would do what you just described. I'd pick up my phone, check Twitter, make sure I had a job, go to work. For 2.5 years. I made it all 4 years. So you should pick up your phone, you should read your phone, and then you should get on with doing the things that matter. It's easy sometimes, and I get it. President Trump can dominate the news like no other human being I've ever encountered. It's easy to get excited when he says, I'm really getting frustrated with Vladimir Putin. And it's easy to become unhappy when President Trump says something like, if we don't get a deal done in the next week, we're going to walk away. What's real and true is what you should focus on, and the things that you can do, whatever your role may be, as a parliamentarian in a European country, as an EU leader, or as Ukrainian leadership, or as a business person. Concentrate on the things you can do, the things that can have impact. Continue to make the case. This is what I have tried to do. I've spent, I was in Congress for 6 years, and I try to avoid Capitol Hill. But I have spent time there, focused really trying to convince the folks in my party, give them the language and the understanding necessary to make the case for what America's interested in, what we need to do to protect ourselves and make sure that we don't have to put our young men and women at risk, and make sure that we still live in a world that looks like the world that delivered so wonderfully for the West, for Europe and the United States broadly, and even for the Western countries in Asia, right? This rules-based system, the post-World War II system, is under real threat. And we have a deep interest in preserving it as best we can with the tools that we have available. And I spend a lot of time doing that. So I advise folks, do the best you can. It's difficult. Avoid the noise, follow the signal, what is really taking place, and I think you'll find that you'll have a more accurate understanding of what's really transpiring.
Thank you very much. You were 17th, please. You were 17th Secretary of State, but 6th, if I'm not mistaken, Director of Central Intelligence Agency. So you had a very consistent job too. Thank you very much. What we feel here, and which was discussed during these 2 days here in Odessa, that the lesson of the Black Sea to this diplomacy is that Russia understands only language of force. Because when Putin, when he attacked, he stopped commercial vessels, commercial shippings in the Black Sea for the first half year. Then it was a great deal with Turkey and President Erdogan. It worked not so good. It worked some, but not so good. Then Russia left. And then when Ukraine destroyed big part of Russian Black Sea fleet and at first attacked Russian tanker with Russian oil, immediately everything stopped. And now you can see, today you will work in Odessa, you can see in the sea a lot of vessels coming in and out. So this is the success, but this success was because Russia was just punched in the face. And immediately they changed behavior. So what do you think about these lessons, and what would you advise to Ukrainian negotiation team, American negotiation team, how to negotiate with Russia in such circumstances?
Negotiations are downstream of true power. You captured it perfectly. If there's no hammer, Vladimir Putin will sit at the table and make demands that are simply not acceptable to Ukraine, to Europe, or to the United States of America. So you're right about a punch in the face. I'll give you the real world examples from my time as a practitioner. And by the way, I get asked often, like, why is it that Vladimir Putin didn't take part of Ukraine for the first 4 years of the Trump administration, the first Trump administration? Why is it? The folks from the other party would say, y'all were just lucky. Fair enough. As a believer, it could just be the good Lord. I'm happy to accept that too. I actually think it was much deeper than that. I actually think it was the fear of being punched in the face. This was the deterrence that I was referring to. Why did he not fear Barack Obama and take Crimea? Because the evidence was he was just going to roll over. Why did he, in February 22, when President Biden, right, literally months after the Trump administration, why did he move then? It's because he thought, look what happened in Afghanistan. This is not a leader who's prepared to actually defend things that matter. And so his perception of risk changed. We had some of those moments too. There was a night when in Syria, the Russians were coming across. There was a kind of a implicit deal that the Americans in Syria would be on the west side of the Euphrates River, and the Russians would be on the east side. And one night I get a call from General Dunford, who was then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who said the Russians are coming across. We need to respond. Here's the idea. We all went and had our conversations. We recommended to the president that we communicate to the Russians that they needed to stop, and if not, that we would stop them. And so we did that. We each called our counterparts, military and intelligence counterparts and diplomatic counterparts, and they denied they were moving across the river. We said, do we need to show you the satellite photos? Come on, let's get serious. And they kept moving. We killed 300 Russians, the first Russians killed in combat in an awfully long time. By the way, full credit to President Trump for doing that. I don't know I don't know that another president would have done that. There's an enormous amount of risk when you're an American killing Russians. I get it. The risk of escalation is real. We had unprotected troops throughout the Middle East. This wasn't an easy decision for him, in spite of the recommendation from his team. So I give him full credit. I think he saw that and said, "Oh my gosh, that's different, right? That's not how others would have responded." Was it small? Yeah. Was it Wagner Force people? Sure. But man, it was express and clear, and they never came across the river again. Those are the kind of things that Vladimir Putin understands, and that is the core point. So, I don't even know if there'll be a conversation in Istanbul on Monday. I don't know who will actually show up. But at some level, it seems relatively futile to me, absent a willingness to say, no, we're going to allow the Ukrainians to actually go do what they did in the Black Sea, and to put Russian assets at risk. And the U.S. for an extended period of time said, no, that's not acceptable. There's too much risk of escalation. And while, I'm happy that Vladimir Putin hasn't pulled out his nuclear arsenal yet, and that risk is always there. Man, my observation as a former practitioner was when he sees a nation prepared to do hard things and take risks and actually impose costs, then and only then will his behavior change. So that's where we find ourselves today. I think that's what we're going to have to go do again. And we should do it, and we should do it collectively, and with the full support, I hope, of every NATO nation. And I know we talk about NATO as a singular entity. Trust me, it's no more singular than the EU. 27 voices, all shouting loudly something different, often. But we ought to find a unified path forward to impose those costs on him and make clear to him that we're prepared to do what we have always done. And when we do, we'll get another moment that is more peaceful than the one we find ourselves in today.
Fantastic answer. Thank you very much. We are coming to the end. I would just want to tell you that I hope in 1 year here in Odessa, the next Black Sea Security Forum, we will praise how President Trump put Putin on his place. How it will be done, we hope, fingers crossed.